I had dinner last night with a bunch of authors, and I'm a teacher. I teach 5th grade. So, although I liked talking to the authors, I tend to like kids more, so I ended up talking to Alicia. It's actually why I really liked talking to Grover as well. I like to talk to children. He's childlike in a way that I love. So I'm going to recommend a different author to you tonight rather than myself. And I'm going to talk about Shakespeare, and please don't get up and leave, because I know it sounds boring, but Alicia sat in front of me, and I decided I'd talk a little bit about Shakespeare. I've never spoken to someone and said, "What are you reading right now?" and they've said Hamlet or Macbeth. I'm still waiting for that day, and I'm praying for it, and it hasn't happened. And I understand why. When we're introduced to Shakespeare, we're usually in high school, and there's a lot of negatives to Shakespeare. It's 500 years old, so the language is a little tough. And it's a play, and we don't walk around reading plays, typically. And we're introduced to it in high school, and I know in high school I was really focused on trying to figure out why no girl would pay me any attention. And so if you introduced me to Shakespeare, I was just busy looking at Heather Davidson, who will probably listen to this. I've already said that before, so she knows. But I do Shakespeare with my students. I've been doing it for 15 years. And it's not because I'm special in any way. There was my first year teaching. I couldn't get the 2nd graders I was teaching to shut up. And I was getting very upset, and I couldn't figure out what to do. So I literally stood atop my desk and said, "Friends, Romans, and countrymen, lend me your ears." And it was like the first moment that they had been quiet all year. And then this little girl looked up and said, "Where's that from?" And it was the first time they had cared about anything I said. So I said, "It's from Shakespeare, it's Julius Caesar." And someone said, "What's Julius Caesar?" And I said, "Oh, it's this great story, and 13 guys stabbed one guy." And like at that moment, I realized I had him. And so for like half an hour, they sat at my feet for the first time all year. And I told them the story of Julius Caesar. And when I finished, they asked me, "Can we do the play?" And they were 2nd graders, so I said no. And then they asked the principal if he could make me. And he was a theater guy, so he said yes. And so I started doing Shakespeare, and I've been doing it ever since. So I've been doing it for 15 years now, and so my kids and I study Shakespeare throughout the year. And when I talk to my kids, if you ask my kids right now, "What are you reading?" they would say Hamlet. And they're the only ones that ever answer that question that way. And when their parents find out they're doing Shakespeare, the reaction is always the same. They're thrilled that their children are doing Shakespeare, and they have absolutely no interest in it themselves. And I don't understand that, because they esteem it to such a great degree, and yet they choose not to read it. So I want you to read Shakespeare. So I'm going to tell you a quick little story. Every year, we do a play. We read it throughout the year. I read a novel version of the story first, a novelization. There's some great ones out there. And then after they have the story, I give them the original text. And then we read it together, and not all of it, but a good portion of it, and they have to figure out the words, and we talk about the meaning, and you just be amazed at what the kids can talk about. And then at the end of the year, we do a play. And so there was a year where I built a stage in my classroom so we can practice right there, so no one bothers us. We close the door, and I don't tell people what I'm doing. And so there was a year that I did Hamlet, and it was my favorite performance. It was my favorite production. I hope my students don't listen to this, because they always ask me, "What's your favorite one?" And I always say, "There's no favorite one. I love them all." But no, I love the Hamlet one the best. But I loved it because of the mistakes that happened in our we do several performances, but there's one for the parents. And the one we did for the parents was especially horrible, and that's why I love it so much. We were performing it, and props are always the problem in children's theater, because the kids never remember them. And so it started, there was a boy named Zach, and he was playing Polonius, who's sort of a puffed up counselor. He comes on stage, and he's supposed to say, gosh, I don't know the line exactly, but it's something like, "Lord Claudius, I have a note for you here from my daughter Ophelia." And Zach, because he was in 3rd grade at the time, he didn't know he had a note, until he literally brought his hand right up before his eyes and said, "I have a note for you." And I could see he looked at his hands and realized the note was not there. Because that's how 3rd graders are. They only live 1 second ahead. And so he said, "I have a note for you from my daughter Ophelia. which I memorized. Because I have photographic memory, and I will recite it for you right now. And it just told me that Zach knew the play. Like, he wasn't just reading words, he knew exactly what to say, and I laughed too loud on the side. And then I thought it was all over, and I was like, thank God we're gonna get through this. And then it got a lot worse. In the final scene of the play, Hamlet's uncle has married. It's a great story if you don't know it. Hamlet's uncle has murdered Hamlet's father and married his wife, Gertrude. And so Hamlet's uncle finds out, and he needs to kill Hamlet because Hamlet's the guy who can get in the way. And so they plan a fencing match. And the plan is to kill Hamlet with a poisoned saber in a fencing match. But he's worried that it might not work out, and so he brings a pearl to the fencing match as well, and it's poison, it's been dipped in poison. And there's a tradition back then that you would present someone a pearl, you would toast them, you'd drop it in the wine glass, toast them, the person would drink the wine and then have the pearl for themselves. And so Claudius's plan is to drop the poisoned pearl into the wine, hand it to Hamlet as a toast in case it doesn't work. So that was supposed to happen, but the girl who was supposed to bring the cup with the Gertrude didn't bring the cup onto the stage. And third graders, for some reason, think that once they're on the stage, they can't walk 4 feet off the stage and pick up the cup that I'm going like this. They just don't move. And so Claudius stands up and he looks for the cup, and he can't find the cup. And I'm waving the cup over on the side, and he's not moving, but he has the pearl. So he holds up the pearl and he says, to you, Lord Hamlet, I toast this pearl. Would you eat it now? And I know the line is, Hamlet says no, not because it's a pearl, it's the actual line that says, no, I'll have a bout first, I'll fight. And so he begins fighting with Laertes with the poisoned saber, and the fight's going on. And the problem is Gertrude then takes the poisoned cup. She's supposed to take the poisoned cup, and she's supposed to drink it. And so Gertrude dies, unfortunately, but there's no cup for her to drink from. And now she realizes it, and I'm still waving the cup, and no one's paying any attention to me. And so she has the pearl, and it's this tiny little bead. It's actually a tiny little bead. I told them we weren't going to use a pearl, and then she had torn it off her dress, and we were using the bead throughout the play. And so she picked up the pearl after Hamlet scores a point, and she says, Hamlet, I toast this to you, the pearl. And then she ate it. She swallowed the little bead in the middle of the play. And I just thought, like, right there, I'm dead. Someone's gonna kill me. I'm losing my job. This is not good. I'm still shaking the cup, but I'm giving up at this point. And then a few minutes later, the poison's supposed to take an effect, and so Gertrude falls out of her chair and she starts going, the pearl, it's supposed to be the wine, but she's saying, the pearl, I ate the pearl. And then the character playing Hamlet starts laughing because he just can't control himself anymore. So he's turned away from the audience so he can laugh. And he's laughing and no one knows why he was turned around. And Gertrude dies, and they kill Claudius, and Laertes dies, or he's dying at the end, the guy who was supposed to stab Hamlet. And in the end, there's 2 characters on the stage, and you have to understand my stage isn't very big, so it's like literally littered with third graders. They're stepping over each other. Because everyone at the end, the Hamlet dies, except for one guy. And so Horatio is at the end the most noble character in the play, and he's with Hamlet. And Hamlet's been stabbed, and he's dying because he's been stabbed by the poison saber. And Horatio decides he's going to kill himself too and join Hamlet in death. And so he says, he's supposed to say to Hamlet something to the effect of, is there any more wine, Hamlet? I wish to kill myself too. And so instead, he looks around and he says, are there any more pearls? And Hamlet says, no, there was but one, and my mom ate it. And then Hamlet dies, Horatio ends the play. And then the most amazing thing happens. None of the parents are aware that anything that is out of the ordinary. Not one of them. Because the kids come in the next morning because it's an evening performance. So I'm sort of stunned. We all go to ice cream later, which is the way I get all the kids to do their work, because I promise ice cream at the end. And so we go to the ice cream place, and none of the parents say a word to me. And I'm thinking they're just being nice to me. And then the next morning, all the kids come in, and they're all like, "You're not going to believe this, Mr. Dix." They didn't know that there was supposed to be a cup on the stage. They didn't know that Molly shouldn't be eating beads in the middle of the play. And it was true. Because none of them had read Hamlet. And none of them knew. And it was all in Old English, so they really couldn't figure it out right. And it was third graders reading Old English, and they talk too fast, so it's hard to figure out what they say. And it's a shame. And so, my third graders and now my fifth graders, they read Hamlet and they read Macbeth and read the tragedies. Those are the best. And those are the ones the kids like the best because there's lots of murder and intrigue. And the comedies are good because you'll think they're funny, but the kids don't get the jokes. And the histories just aren't very good. But he's an extraordinary writer, and I'm still waiting for an adult to tell me that that's the book they're reading. I'm still waiting to get to a book club someday. I go to book clubs and visit them, and they're never reading Shakespeare. And you all want your kids to read Shakespeare, I know it, and you all want, if you had a fifth grader, you'd be psyched if your kid was reading Shakespeare. But you need to be reading Shakespeare. So the shelf actually, I planned 3 minutes ahead, I'll have you know, Anne, because 3 minutes before I sat down, I asked Casey if you have Shakespeare, because I thought of it. So the shelf is right there. And honestly, if you're going to buy my book tonight, I thank you, but buy Shakespeare. If you have whatever my book costs, I actually don't know, spend it on Shakespeare. And I really mean that. And bring it to me, because I've made it a habit of signing other authors' books. When I recommend a book, if the author is not present, if I recommended the book, I feel like they're not going to mind if I sign the book. And I sign it as my name or the author. Shakespeare will not sign your book. It's just not going to happen. But Matthew Dix will sign Shakespeare's book for you as Matthew Dix, or I prefer to sign it as William Shakespeare. And I'll put whatever message you want in there from William Shakespeare. So I really, in all sincerity, I really encourage you to pick up some Shakespeare, to take some time and read it. I am not a genius. My children are not geniuses at all. But they all understand the stories and they love them, and you will too. So I encourage you to do that tonight. Thank you very much.